B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. We are told to shelter in place here in the San Francisco Bay Area. But there are no checkpoints, no National Guard to tell you what to do. And I am glad to present news and comment here on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, Tuesday, 2020. And people are sheltering in place with their Guinness and their Irish whiskey today. All the St. Paddy's Day parades have been canceled or postponed, and I hereby, as an Irishman myself, authorize you to be just as Irish as you want to be today. So we're seeing a dramatic shift in tone from the Trump White House. It appears that having been tested and claiming that he did test negative for the coronavirus, Trump figured out that this pandemic could be his political death knell. And so yesterday, he appeared somber in the White House, and he insists on these photo walls behind him, human walls. So Mike Pence and, Alex, blocking on the guy's name, the head of Health and Human Services, they all have to stand there behind him whenever the president speaks. Now, this is a risk to their personal health at this point. But that's the image that the reality TV star insists upon. And it seems like he has shifted this from a, kind of lighthearted laugh track show to more of a serious primetime drama. Because everything's about TV, everything's about the optics, and everything is about Trump himself and his own interests. And so here in the Bay Area, things are settling down. Yesterday on my way home, I went to a local produce store, and I just needed a couple of tomatoes. There were some tomatoes in the store. All the meat was wiped out. All the bread was gone. But the lines at the register were over half an hour long. So this morning I went back and got my tomatoes, and I didn't have to wait in line. It does seem that the panic buying is slowing down a bit. And yesterday, the public health officials in 7 Bay Area counties advised us all to shelter in place. They've shut down all non-essential businesses, and there were huge lines. People anticipating that they might not be able to get things that they really, really want. The biggest lines were at gun stores and weed shops. In San Francisco, where we sell cannabis in retail locations, adults only, the lines were around the corner. And I guess people are getting ready to, weather a long time trapped at home. And personally, as a sometime cannabis user, I have to say that I'm not smoking these days because I think it is better to preserve my lung health in case I am visited by the coronavirus. So I want you to know that things are calm and relatively stable here. People are grappling with all sorts of concerns like, what happens when my money runs out? And we know 38% of people have zero savings and are living paycheck to paycheck. And when the paycheck is taken away, and people can file right away for unemployment, but there are huge gaps of people who are going to be left out. And on Facebook last night, I shared my advice with Governor Gavin Newsom here in California. We're sitting on a $20 billion surplus and a separate $19 billion rainy day fund. And to its credit, the California legislature yesterday rammed through $1 billion in emergency relief that basically can be spent at the governor's discretion. And my advice is the governor can call the state tax office and say, hey, give me a list of all the people under, say, household income of $50,000 a year who took the renter's credit last year. And take a look and see if they have more than one source of income. Not just a paycheck that is their main source. Maybe they've got 5 W-2s showing that they've got 5 different sources of employment. Maybe they work as an independent contractor. And my idea is that these are the most vulnerable people right now to survive income interruption. And meanwhile, the Trump White House has scuttled its discussion of a payroll tax cut, which would damage Social Security and Medicaid and might never be reinstated. And they're trading that for checks to Americans. Now, I refer to it as party cash because Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary who presided over foreclosures before he joined the Trump administration, he's a ruthless scumbag rich guy. And he's saying that he wants to get checks to Americans. Now, it's not based on their level of need. It's based on what he thinks is necessary to keep the economy running as people's incomes are interrupted. And keep in mind that the bailouts coming from Washington first target the airlines. No. First, it's the banks and Wall Street. Number 2 is the airlines, and we discussed that yesterday with Columbia professor Tim Wu's admonition, don't feel sorry for the airlines. They squandered the profits they earned on stock buybacks, and they've loaded up on debt. And yet they're the first to come forward with a demand for a handout from an American industry besides the banking system. In addition, they slipped in behind airline hotels. Now, who is one of the... yes, I'm sure the Trump properties would happily pocket subsidies. And they've had record profits of their own, at least some of them, including the Washington Hotel right down the street from the White House, where all kinds of Trump fans dump bundles of money. And don't forget Mar-a-Lago. I'm sure Trump would take any kind of a bailout, whether he needs it or not. So once again, with thanks to Linda Lewis for compiling today's COVID-19 summary, we're getting a range of estimates. The Centers for Disease Control reports the total caseload now at 4,226. CNN says that number is 4,940, and the New York Times says it has already passed 5,000. Now, I realize it's hard to keep up with this, but the CDC has not been a real reliable source of data so far. On the fatality rate, 75 deaths in 49 states, according to the CDC, and according to CNN, it is a total of 97 people who have died so far. The S&P Global has already said that the world's economy is heading into global recession. And while technically you have to go through 2 quarters of zero GDP growth to technically qualify as a recession, to me it's very clear. It's not disputable at this point that we are going to have a downturn that will last for some time. It is the depth and length of that recession which, is up for speculation at this point. So I'm glad to see them pass on the payroll tax. I think that is a very dangerous thing to fiddle with. And we also have more clarity. It sounded like they were going to extend the deadline to file taxes past April 15th, but they're saying that's not the case. You don't need to pay your taxes on April 15th. You get 90 days interest-free. What a generous government. So we have now a patchwork of policies across the country. On social gatherings, Trump says 10, some states say 50, some say 250. And here in California, we've now been instructed just not to socialize. You must isolate yourselves. And I think most people are going along with it. So we're going to see how all this plays out. Today is election day for the primaries. Voting is going ahead in Florida, Illinois, Arizona, but Ohio, late last night, less than 8 hours before the polls were set to open, Governor Mike DeWine finally got clarity from the courts that he could suspend the poll voting and allow absentee balloting to continue until the rescheduled date of June 2nd. And the DNC better get its act together because they are claiming that states that delay their primaries will suffer a loss of delegates. And I think there is no basis to do that. There have been situations in the past where it made sense because states shifted their primary election date to game the system. But this is not gaming of any nature. Now, one of the reasons that the data at the CDC may be affected is that there was a reported cyber incident at the computer networks of the Department of Health and Human Services over the weekend. But they're saying that, no data were compromised, and they're taking appropriate steps. They claim they know it was a foreign entity, but they're not saying who. And, of course, people instantly go to Russia because Russia does all the hacking, right? But China is aggrieved. Iran is aggrieved. And both of those nations believe that this coronavirus was the result of a bioweapon release, either intentional or inadvertent. Now, I can't prove that or disprove it. What I do know is on Facebook, when people put up posts that repeat the allegations from China and Iran, they are getting fact-checked. And Facebook puts up a little notation that USA Today has determined that the virus came from Wuhan, China. And any other discussion is off limits. So this is an interesting note. In Maryland, they're going to turn car inspection locations into drive-through testing centers. And just before I sat down here for the podcast, I saw a report from Alabama showing a long, long line of vehicles lined up for a mobile testing center, a drive-through testing center, which opened yesterday and is already out of testing kits. Now, I don't know the rules on who can get in that line and qualify for a coronavirus test because we still have limited access to testing and to the lab process to see what the outcome of the test is. So at this point, we are told by NBC News that all 50 state health departments have a public health lab testing for coronavirus, and an increasing number of commercial and academic labs are testing as well. So we're making some progress, and I do think that you're going to hear in a moment from Governor Cuomo of New York. One of his complaints is that on things like school closures and retail store closures, that there is not a uniform standard nationally. And I think that is a fair criticism of the poor leadership coming from the Trump administration. Also, I want to mention that here in the Bay Area, the cruise ship, the Grand Princess, has left the dock in Oakland. It was there a week. It is now anchored in San Francisco Bay. There are 1,100 or more crew members on that ship. Most of them are not Americans. And based on all the reporting I've seen, and I criticize the local media because they've focused only on the passengers on the cruise ship, and they've been treated badly, and it's been chaotic. There is news there. But there's also news about this crew. And from everything I know, these non-Americans were not permitted to leave the ship in Oakland. We have no reporting that they have received testing or medical attention. And I fear that under Trump, they are seen as disposable. But I don't believe that that's the way Californians should respond to that. Now, despite his effort to unite the nation by reading words off a page, Trump spent the morning heckling individual state governors on Twitter. The only one I know about is Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, who Trump singled out for criticism in a tweet. Also, I want to note that these are different times. I've known Thom Hartmann, the radio and TV host, since I think I met him in 2003. Maybe it was 2002. We were both on the same radio network owned by the United Auto Workers out of Detroit with the bizarre name IE America. Anyway, I've known Tom this long, and I have never, ever heard him drop an F-bomb. He's just not that kind of guy. So there is a post on Facebook attributed to Tom, that's Thom Hartmann. Number 1, dear airlines, hotel chains, banks, and other industries who are begging Donald Trump and Congress for bailouts. Get in the fucking line. Most of you didn't even pay taxes last year. The front of the line this time needs to be people with medical and student debt. 2, people who have lost their jobs, people who are homeless, and people working on the gig economy. Everybody else, get in the fucking line. In 2008, the Bush administration was able to find over $20 trillion to bail out the banks and insurance companies. Last year, Trump found, this is item 3, $1.5 trillion to cut taxes to the billionaire class and America's largest corporations. It's not going to happen again if we have anything to say about it. They can all get in the fucking line behind the rest of us, human beings here. Well said, Tom. F-bomb at will. So, this is all part of an effort to stimulate the economy. And I have argued that by cutting taxes, as Trump did at the time and in the size, and by just hammering the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low, even as the economy was improving, Trump has exhausted most of the remedies. And so all of this stimulus is going to be borrowed. They've already pushed out trillions to the banks, to what they call commercial paper, and we have seen that in general the market has not responded. Now today, the market did not go further down, and it appears to have rebounded by, 600 or 700 points after losing thousands of points over the last 2 weeks. So the overall size they're talking about right now ranges from $850 billion in a Republican plan, $750 billion in a Senate Democratic plan that's been put together by Chuck Schumer. And there are differences. There were amendments made to the House bill that was passed late last Friday night that appear to have eliminated more people via exemptions from the relief that was intended. So this is going to get complicated, and they're going to be ramming stuff through faster than we can pay attention, faster than we can absorb all the details. And this is what happened after 9/11 that brought us the Patriot Act, that led us into the war in Iraq. And so I must urge you to remain vigilant. And we may get some party cash in the mail, but we need to insist that the people who really need it get first attention. And as Tom says, everybody else should just get in the fucking line. Here's the modifications. Late Monday night, the House approved additional changes limiting the scope of the required new sick leave benefits. The House made it easier for employers to exempt emergency workers and other health care businesses from the new rules. Why? I mean, I cannot see any rationale for that. I need more detail to really understand it. And to help us cope with these trying times, I have linked in the show file to this snarky video of unknown provenance, but clearly from Britain. And let's listen to this little news update just for a little comic relief, because all our favorite comics are off TV right now.
Hello, I'm from the government with an urgent message about the coronavirus. We know many of you are confused. Some say it's no big deal. Italians are freaking out. The Chinese are hiding out. And Aussies seem to think the virus attacks your butthole. Medical experts have coined a scientific term to describe the situation we're now facing, a shit show. It's important to note that the shit show isn't caused by the virus itself, which we can manage, but rather by dangerous levels of egregious dumb fuckery spreading about the virus. Through forensic analysis, experts have traced the path of the dumb fuckery back to this malignant shit funnel, who said he's not worried about corona since it's no worse than the flu. One of the symptoms of dumb fuckery includes not understanding simple math, leading many to laugh off this virus for only having a death rate of about 2%. Since experts say the US alone could have 96 million cases, 2% of that comes to approximately a lot of fucking dead people. Of course, the death rate is much higher among older people. This has been largely dismissed due to another symptom of dumb fuckery, not caring about the elderly, or as experts call it, being an asshole. If left unchecked, this shit show can drastically worsen the impact of coronavirus by overwhelming a country's healthcare services. For example, the US only has 1 million hospital beds. Oh, and face masks will probably run out too. So as doctors...
So I'm going to pause it there, and I do encourage you to click on the link, and you can share that video with your friends who aren't offended by terms like, shit show and dumb fuckery. And since right before I paused it there, she mentioned the need for more hospital beds, I want to play a clip for you from Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York. He's not my favorite American politician. He's far from progressive. But he is showing some steady leadership at a critical time. And I'd like you to hear his appeal to President Trump.
You're going to need more hospital capacity. You're going to need more facilities. You're going to need ways to free up those 53,000 beds. You're going to need to construct or retrofit physical buildings, acquire thousands of pieces of equipment like this. The state can't do that. I don't have that workforce. I don't have the resources, but even if I had the resources, I don't have the physical capacity to turn SUNY dorms into hospitals in 3 weeks. I can't. There's only one workforce that can do that. It's the Army Corps of Engineers and the military assets. That's what they do. They build bridges, they build camps, they have tens of thousands of personnel, trucks, equipment, excavators, logistical managers, purchasing power. Use them to come in right now, identify existing facilities that can be retrofitted, and use them to do it. China built dozens of hospitals in literally like a month. How? The Chinese government came in and said, we're going to do this, we're going to nationalize it.
I think Cuomo gets it right. This is a federal response situation, and Trump is willing to divert American soldiers and National Guard members to the goddamn border, where they're not permitted by American law to do anything except oil their trucks and stand around. And this is a situation where deploying military assets in the United States, and the Corps of Engineers have built dams and many other infrastructure facilities in this country so it doesn't violate posse comitatus. And I believe that Cuomo was responding to the conference call where all 50 governors were on with Trump yesterday, and when they demanded more ventilators and breathing equipment, respirators. Trump said, well, you might try to find that on your own. And I didn't feel he was officially, initially or obviously venomous about it. A lot of people have taken that quote and basically, used it to make Trump look bad. And I'm not opposed to making Trump look bad. He does a good job of it all on his own. But the bottom line is the politics and the partisanship don't matter. It is time for a meaningful response. Turning now to the chaos and confusion about primary elections today, Kevin Gosztola is the talented journalist and the editor who runs shadowproof.com. And on Facebook last night, he wrote this, I'd call it a satirical piece. Amid a global pandemic, I'm going to do my civic duty tomorrow and go out and risk getting sick or risk getting you all sick while I vote for Joe Biden, who wants the healthcare and health insurance industries to still be able to stick me and whomever I infect with thousands of dollars in bills. Yeah, you heard that right. We need a crisis president, someone whose campaign is smug and condescending to people who want to change the world. We need a campaign that gives people a false sense of safety during an outbreak and tells us if you don't have any symptoms of the coronavirus, you can still vote. Biden's base of elderly voters may all be dead by November. It's a time of strife. We voted in a time of war before. We can lather up with gallons of hand sanitizer that would be better used by nurses and go out and become vectors of the Rona for no malarkey Joe. Sure, Ohio's Department of Health declared a health emergency and ordered the polls closed. But that's because the state governor isn't on Team Biden. Illinois could totally put the public's health first if it didn't mean giving Grandpa Joe more time to show the world he is an habitual liar who won't take responsibility for being wrong. In the morning, I'm stealing masks from the local hospital and going down to my polling place. Everyone gets a mask to protect them from COVID-19. That is, as long as they agree the revolution must wait. We need more of the status quo that brought us President Trump. Now, Kevin, in his spare time, has been pursuing a career, or at least a sideline, as an improv comic. And I think we see the results in that post. Over at The Guardian, Sam Levine is making a case that because of the virus and because of its impact on our elections, that we should shift completely to voting by mail. And I know that this is attractive to many people. Most of the people I know here in California vote by mail. But one local columnist was glad that he didn't vote by mail because he was going to vote for Elizabeth Warren, who dropped out days before our primary here in California. So while I do see this as a short-term, positive approach, the risks of fraud in voting by mail are substantial. And we saw it play out in the election fraud in North Carolina. It was Congressional District 10, if I remember correctly, where they had a guy who was making money, being paid by campaigns to manage the mail-in ballots of many people. And he had a group, a squad of people who would go out. And when the people voted for candidates not supported by this operation, they simply trashed the ballots. And when the votes were for the Republicans who had paid for all this, those votes were submitted. The other anomaly here, and I don't know how they do it in every state, but in California, the person who votes absentee puts their signature on the outside of the envelope. And then people at the election office compare that signature to the signature that the person gave when they registered to vote, which could have been 50 years ago. Signatures change, handwriting changes over time, and election workers are not experts on graphology. So, as you can tell, I'm not completely comfortable shifting to an entire absentee ballot system. There are also issues that some states don't permit it. Other states, you have to specify a checkbox. There's no room for other. And so this is another reason why we should have uniform voting regulations in this country, but we don't. Over on Facebook, one of my friends who's a math whiz, Sean Richardson, ran the numbers. In Italy, there have been 28,000 reported infections and 2,150 reported deaths. Now, this is a day old, and I believe those numbers have gone up. But based on that, in a population of 60 million people, he runs the numbers. And the rate of infection is 4.5 per 10,000 people, which is 0.046%. And the death rate is roughly 0.00347%, which is 3.5 people dying from coronavirus per 100,000 in Italy. Now, I offer this not to challenge the science that is being used to drive the response to pandemic here in the United States, but to try to reduce some of the fear and panic that people have. And last night, Rachel Maddow offered a Skype interview with Dan Goldman. He was one of the lawyers on the House Impeachment Committee. And he contracted coronavirus. He thought he had it, but he couldn't get tested in New York City. So he actually said he got up in the middle of the night and drove to Connecticut, where he got tested, confirmed that he's positive for coronavirus. Now, he presented as recovering, appeared very healthy, described it as annoying and flu-like. But it is fair to say that most people who contract this will not die from it. We still must reduce transmission at this critical stage. And so I do support the efforts that have been taken, as chaotic and delayed as at the federal level they have been. And how about this from Facebook, one of my right-wing friends, and I stay friends with them because I like to know what the right-wingers are thinking about. She posted, "How many of you believe that the media is creating the panic so things will close down, hurt our economy, to hurt our president? Capital O, capital P." Louise says, "People are not going to change horses in midstream. The campaign is over. DT is the winner." Jeff says, "No, not only to hurt the president, it's to hurt the good Americans that support him. Maximum pain is their goal." Ernest says, "I do think they're trying to hurt Trump, and it hurts everyone, not just poor and young or old. Media sucks." And one more from Benjamin Holk. He says the fallout from COVID-19 can be listed this way: reduce population, crash the economy, keep them in fear, further police state. So it's going to take a lot to get these cultists to separate from their cult leader. I continue to be shocked by the idiocy of so many Trump supporters. I've been focusing a lot on the domestic response, but I want to alert you that at the Gray Zone Project, Ben Norton has a great article today about the new strongman in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. And when he campaigned, he slammed the 10,000 Cuban doctors who were working in his country, tagging them as a nefarious fifth column, denigrated them as terrorists, and he pledged to expel them, and when he got the election, he did so. Now he and his health minister are begging Cuba to send the doctors back to Brazil. One of his comments from the campaign a couple of years ago, the opposition party, the Workers' Party, sent about 10,000 costumed doctors to Brazil here in poor places to create guerrilla cells and indoctrinate people, so much that when I arrived, they left because I was going to go after them. Now, we know that 14 people in the entourage of Bolsonaro have been tested and tested positive for the coronavirus. And Glenn Greenwald has a great piece at The Intercept today from Brazil about how the Bolsonaro family initially told the truth, or appeared to, that Daddy did test positive for the virus. And they told it to Fox News. And then they walked it back and claimed that Fox News is fake news. It's a crazy, crazy world we live in, friends. Another piece by Leonardo Flores at the Gray Zone Project notes the damage in Venezuela and that the continuing sanctions by the United States the declaration that March is maximum pressure March against the Maduro government in Venezuela, that Trump has talked about a possible naval blockade of Venezuela. Well, people are dying there. And the U.S. sanctions have been responsible for, last year, the estimate was at least 40,000 unnecessary deaths in Venezuela. Well, now the sanctions, limits on banking, limit the ability to purchase medical supplies, testing kits. Maduro has appealed directly to Trump to lift the sanctions. He has also reached out to China and Cuba, who have supplied some necessary medical supplies. And on March 7th, the opposition burned down a warehouse where virtually all of Venezuela's electronic voting machines were stored. These are the same people who claim they want new elections to get rid of Maduro. So we are unrelenting and cruel at a time when we really should be reconsidering these ill-advised moves. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Great people like Dick Atlee, Terry Paris, who has 3, 4, a dozen subscriptions, Billy Cook, Brian Carey, and there's Teresa Paris again. I thank each and every one of you for your support. And we have a new subscriber. I'm sorry I don't have his name in front of me right now, who just signed up yesterday. Why don't you follow his lead? Come on over to peterbcollins.com, click on the menu tab, click on Become a Subscriber. You'll hit the sign-up page, and you can set up a new subscription. It's as easy as pie. And if you don't like PayPal, you can communicate with me through the U.S. mail at Box 15660, San Rafael, California, zip code 94915. Well, I mentioned earlier how the Patriot Act was slipped through with all of the bad elements that continue to haunt us to this day. And let us recall that only one member of the House voted against it. Her name is Barbara Lee. She continues to represent Oakland in the House of Representatives. But yesterday, the Senate voted to temporarily reinstate the FISA law and a handful of newly expired FBI tools, as the New York Times calls them. Now, these are violations of our Fourth Amendment rights. These are spying on American citizens in the United States. So senators unanimously agreed to extend until early June this package, and they made no amendments to the FISA law. Now, I linked to this article from the New York Times because I hope you'll read it and scour it very closely and see if you see a single Democrat who is quoted or even mentioned in this article. The Democrats all line up and vote for more spying, continued spying on American citizens. They don't give a shit about our Fourth Amendment rights. And it falls to people like Mike Lee of Utah, Rand Paul of Kentucky, Josh Hawley, a freshman from Missouri. And their issues with the FISA law are generally related to protecting Trump, not to protecting Americans. Well, he, I guess, is an American, but you know what I meant. So I encourage you to watch this carefully. The final sentence here says that some of the amendments proposed would expand criminal penalties for misusing FISA, raising from 5 years to 8 years the prison sentence for engaging in electronic surveillance without following its procedures. What bullshit. I'm sorry, it leaves me in a puddle of laughter here. It doesn't matter what the penalty is. Nobody ever gets held accountable. So you may have heard about this. Yesterday, the Justice Department under Bill Barr, who is a corrupt protector of Trump, moved to drop charges against the 2 Russian shell companies accused of interfering in the 2016 election. The companies, Concord Management and Concord Consulting, were charged in a 2018 indictment by Robert Mueller III, St. Bob, along with 13 Russians and another company that's better known called the Internet Research Agency. And what Mueller never expected when he filed his showboat indictments that everybody knows will never lead to any kind of meaningful trial or conviction. Hunkered fought back. They hired American lawyers. And in the language of the protectors of Russiagate, the New York Times, quote, instead of trying to defend itself, Hunkered seized on the case to obtain confidential information from prosecutors, then mount a campaign of information warfare, according to a senior Justice Department official who is not named or quoted. Now, what Hunkered did was use the American court system very effectively. They fought back. They used discovery to demand documents. And apparently some of those documents wound up on the internets. I didn't know about that, and I haven't attempted to read them. But even the Times admits that in dismissing the case, the prosecutors weighed the benefits of securing a guilty verdict against the companies, which cannot be meaningfully punished in the United States, against the risk of exposing national security secrets in order to win in court. Now, Mueller knew that from the day he filed these indictments. It's just for show. Oh, and the indictments were so detailed with days and times and names of the Russian characters who did all this. But it was all pursuing a phony narrative. We still have no public evidence that Russia hacked the DNC and gave a single digital file to WikiLeaks. But because of the Mueller report, which simply repeated the claims of the intelligence community, it is now treated as fact in American media and in the minds, particularly of most Democrats and people who believe that Russia meddled and tilted the 2016 election. And according to RT, the state-backed media enterprise of Russia, the head of Hunkered, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's also known as Putin's chief, that's what it says in RT. It's chef, baby. Chef. Anyway, Prigozhin is ready to file $50 billion libel and damages suit against the U.S. government. Now, that's a case that'll be fun to watch. In The Guardian today, I think a well-written but brief comment from Arwa Madawi. And she states in her headline, Joe Biden's pledge to pick a female vice president smells like tokenism. And I agree with that. It is pandering of a certain order. In the debate the other night, for Biden not only to say he'll pick a woman as his VP running mate, but he will put a black woman on the Supreme Court if he's elected. There's all this speculation about Stacey Abrams, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren. If Biden is going to pick a woman and a black person, I'd like it to be Barbara Lee, the courageous congresswoman from Oakland who I referenced earlier. And Madawi writes, while none of these eminently qualified women will be president anytime soon, one lucky lady may have the privilege of playing second fiddle to a gaffe-prone white guy. To cement his position as intersectional male feminist of the year, Biden also promised to appoint an African-American woman to the Supreme Court. She says, don't get me wrong, I'm pleased Biden will pick a female running mate. Apart from anything else, there's normally a vice presidential debate, and I'd like to see Mike Pence, who refuses to eat dinner alone with a woman other than his wife, get eviscerated by a member of the second sex. However, Biden's reveal also made my eyes roll. It felt like a lot of pandering. Representation is important, but not as important as policy. I'm with Sanders, who didn't commit to a female running mate, but said, for me, it's not just nominating a woman, it's making sure we have a progressive woman. And she closes, sadly, pandering gestures tend to be more politically effective than principled stances. Sanders says what he believes, not what will make an expedient soundbite. His uncompromising integrity is his biggest strength and his biggest flaw. Over at the Jacobin Project, or Jacobin Mag, Branko Marcetic leafs through the lies that Joe Biden told on the stage the other night. And I've been in a Facebook dispute with my old pal Rich Robinson. He's a diehard Biden supporter. And he put up this infuriating post that Bernie lied on stage during the debate, claiming that Bernie lied about not having his own super PAC. Bernie is supported by one political action committee that I'm aware of. It's the Nurses Union. It's not dark money because the money comes from members of the Nurses Union. And Bernie also has a nonprofit 501c4 called Our Revolution, and I wish he would shut it down. It's only raised about $1 million. It hasn't done anything to campaign for him, and some of his family members have been on the payroll there. Marcetic does a good job of exposing the falsehoods and the dissembling that were uttered by Joe Biden in the debate. And I encourage you to follow the link and read the piece. We've all got plenty of time on our hands these days, right? After the debate, Anita Dunn, who is a senior advisor to Biden, went on a conference call and said, I think it's fair to say that Biden showed up to a debate tonight and for 2 hours graciously dealt with the kind of protester who often shows up at campaign events on live television. Now, this is the Anita Dunn who recently was an advisor to Harvey Weinstein. And before that, she was a paid lobbyist for TransCanada, pushing through the Keystone XL pipeline. So this has produced a lot of progressive blowback. Jeet here, The Nation, the Biden people have nothing but contempt for the progressive wing of the party. Columbia Law School student Alex Clavering tweeted, the Democratic Party has nothing but disdain for activists. Glenn Greenwald, when Democratic establishment figures spend a couple of weeks condescendingly pretending to like and respect Sanders and his voters, remember what they really think of you. And I just wanted to tag on here that during the debate the other night, one of the most disingenuous comments from Biden was that Italy has a single-payer system, as if the inability to deal with the massive number of cases because of coronavirus is a function of how the system is funded. That was just so insulting, and I'm still angry about it. Yesterday, I mentioned the situation in Israel, where Netanyahu's desperately trying to hold on to power, talking about a crisis government, and the president, Reuven Rivlin, tapped the opposition leader, Benny Gantz, of Blue and White, to try to form a government. Well, today, I recommend this piece by Miko Peled, published at Mint Press News, where he describes the institutional racism in Israel, and that Benny Gantz, who claims 61, which is just enough votes in the Knesset to form a government, but 15 of those votes come from what is called the Joint List, the Arab List. These are properly elected members of the Knesset who represent Arab citizens of Israel. They are clearly treated under an apartheid standard. They are second-classed. They are considered or disloyal to the state of Israel. And Peled writes, the reality that was subsequently forced on him, that's Benny Gantz, and all the other Zionist parties, is an impossible one. Half of them want Netanyahu to remain as prime minister. The other half despise him and want him out. They all want a seat at the table, but none of them have enough seats to get what they want. Gantz said several times that if Netanyahu steps down, he'll agree to form a national unity government. But he is loath to embrace the Arab citizens of the state of Israel and their representatives. And finally, today, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Duncan Hunter, actually Duncan Hunter II, was sentenced today to 11 months in federal prison and 3 years of probation after admitting to stealing campaign funds for his personal use. His wife apparently won't be charged. She was running the campaign, and he initially threw her under the bus for this. And I will note, just in comparison, that Jesse Jackson Jr. was convicted on similar charges. I believe the amount of money that was misdirected of about $250,000 was similar in Jesse Jr.'s case. He got 30 months in federal prison, and his wife, who signed off on fraudulent tax returns, got a year in federal prison. Looks like the Republicans are getting off easier for similar crimes. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. Feel free to share it all over the place. You'll find it on YouTube. I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.